this particular webinar is very much a delivery style webinar. It's very, very information focused, and it's designed, as I said, to inform and then motivate you to take action that's going to be beneficial to both your physical and to your mental health. Okay. So the starting point is to just really remind ourselves that the brain and the body are interconnected. It seems obvious when I say it, and it's one of those, sort of, oh, well, that's a readily apparent truth. But so often in our lives, we disconnect the two. And look, I'm not going to go into the philosophical history behind why that happened, but it did happen. It happened in about the 15th century, where we literally had the mind-body split occur, and people started to sort of see their mind as something that took place just in a brain, and to see their body as being something separate to that. So you'll very often find people who really value their brains and take good care of them, and don't take care of their bodies at all. And other people who will take good care of their bodies, but don't really pay much attention to their mind and to their brain. So they're integrally connected. You'll see the red on this image. That's not a bad way of sort of seeing the primary aspect of that interconnection. You'll hear people talk about the brain in your heart and the brain in your gut. And that's because there's a huge number of neurons that are active in and around your heart and in and around and throughout your gut. Of course, our entire body is full of nerves and nerve endings, that all of which are communicating constantly with the brain, and also communicating constantly with one another, and also being communicated to by the brain. So it's always a two-way highway back and forth between the brain and all parts of the body. So that leads to the question of, what is the purpose of the brain, and what is the purpose of this neural system that we have? If you ask people this question, like, well, why do you have a brain? People will usually go, well, I need to be able to think. Other people will say, well, it's not about thinking, it's about relating to other people. We're social organisms, like monkeys, and we connect with one another. That's what mammals do. And so the purpose of the brain is to help us to relate and to connect to one another. Others will say, well, actually, I use my brain for problem solving. That's what it's best for. So it's a problem solving machine. Others will say, actually, well, my mind and my brain, they're creative forces, and they're really great at creating great art. And the purpose of my brain is to create great art. The really interesting insight comes from these little critters called squirt worms. Now, squirt worms are really interesting. They're little coral creatures. And what you're seeing is the adult form, and you can see it's attached to the coral there, which is what they do. They're born independent and free, and they sort of get carried by the currents across the coral reefs, and they can also self-propel. They can actually move themselves. And what they will do is they'll move themselves into a position on the coral that they sense is the best spot for them to set up and live the rest of their lives, because they do then live the rest of their lives attached to the same piece of coral. What's really interesting about these creatures and what they teach us about the brain is that once they've fixed to the coral, they immediately go ahead and digest their entire brain and nervous system, and use the energy that they gain from their nervous system and brain to really firmly fix on and into the coral. What this teaches us about the brain and the body is that the body doesn't need a brain to live. It doesn't need a nervous system to live. What it needs a brain for is to move. And so the purpose of the brain is to move. Another great example close to home is the cute cuddly koala. So koalas, what's really interesting about koalas is that koalas have the smallest brain proportional to the size of their body of all mammals. So why do koalas have such small brains? Historically, if we look back in time to a time when koalas were much more active, they had a wide diet, and they would crawl around on the forest floor looking for food. we know from archaeological remains that those koalas, those early koalas, had much bigger brains. As the koala evolved to live in treetops and had a singular diet of, of gum leaves, of a particular kind of gum leaves, that is when the brain of the koala started to shrink. Because the koala just had to sit in a tree, move slowly around the tree, and chew on some gum leaves. Every now and again, two koalas will bump into each other and they'll have a baby koala. But there's not much movement involved. And so the purpose of the brain really is to control complex movements, which is a really interesting insight into that how integral that connection is between the body and the brain. And you begin to think about, okay, well, if the koala became sedentary and its brain started to shrink, well, what's going to happen to me and other humans if we stop moving? What's going to happen to our brains? So there's a very commonly referred to part of the brain that's now known as the polyvagal system. It's been known about for a long time, but we never really understood it as this polyvagal system. It sits in the brain stem. It's very much associated with the reactive part of the brain. A way of thinking about the brain is that we've got a brain stem, and then we get to the base of the brain. They use the hand as a symbol. So where this is the brain stem going down to the body, and then in the bottom of the brain here you've got the brain stem, and they call this the reptilian brain because in terms of evolution, that was the first part of the brain to develop, and that's the same part of the brain that we share with animals like reptiles that are very instinctual and don't do so much thinking. Then developed this part they call the limbic system, which is common to mammals, and as that developed, that's the reptilian brain that goes inside. Then the mammal brain wraps around the top, and the mammal brain is all about connection. And so the mammal brain is all about us learning how to connect and be in groups like mammals. We like to huddle up together for safety. We like to live together. We like to hunt together. We like to do things together. And then around the top here, around the front of the brain, is what they call the prefrontal cortex, which is the human part of our brain. That it's the part of the brain that really only we have, and to some extent, monkeys have started to develop this part of the brain as well. And that's where we do all of our complex thinking. So much of what psychology is focused on, and much of what mental health is focused on, is this early reptilian part of the brain in the brainstem. This is where the polyvagal system is. And this is where our fight, flight, freeze response takes place. So it's outside of anything that's more advanced and anything to do with logical thinking. The problems that we have with our polyvagal system, our or that's sometimes called the autonomic nervous system, is in hyperarousal when it gets activated and we either want to fight or flee. If you think about being an animal on the savannah or an early man on the savannah, you see something dangerous like a lion and you just want to get away from it. So either we want to fight, we're angry, we're aggressive, we're frustrated, we're full of rage. This is where road rage comes from. This is where people get into fights after a big night at the pub because their polyvagal system activates and the rest of their brain is a bit slow and murky because of the alcohol, and the fight response takes over. Or we want to flee. So in terms of psychology, the flee part is nervousness, anxiety, panic, shame, the desire to hide. Hypoarousal is sort of a depressing of the entire system. It initiates what we call a freeze response. So commonly in the wild, an animal, particularly a prey animal, if it's under threat, it will play dead. Now, this isn't kind of a well thought through, considered response. It's a very much an automatic response. And essentially the whole body will actually shut down. And we do this too. Except when we do it in our complex modern societies, we call it depression. It's associated with a dullness, a numbness in the body, a sense of dissociation, a sense of disconnection with the body. And all of these are very common presentations in the counselling clinic. So those are some of the things we're trying to work with in psychology. And the way we work with them is we try and help people shift out of the hypoarousal and hyperarousal into this kind of window of tolerance, this zone where the more advanced part of the brain is able to cope with the symbols, cope with the not the symptoms or the symbols, but the signals, cope with the signals that are coming up from the body, because the signals are coming from the body saying, we've got to get out of here, we've got to do something, going back to the body saying, shut down, get angry, fight, run away, and learning how to regulate those and to keep them in a window of tolerance that is acceptable to us in our day-to-day life. So the connection we're looking at is the connection between how we regulate this window of tolerance. How do we regulate and stay within the window of tolerance through the use of physical activity? And we'll go on a little bit later to talk about the kinds of physical activity that can be helpful, but anything that involves movement of your body works. This is a good quote that indicates the importance of physical activity. It's from Time magazine in 2016. And it's a psychiatrist and particularly a pharmacological scientist saying, if there, neuroscientist and psychiatrist saying, if there were a drug that could do for human health everything that exercise can, it would likely be the most valuable pharmaceutical ever developed. And what that talks to is it talks to the extent that as modern humans, we go to the GP and we expect a pill. Yeah, we go and say, I feel this, I feel that. Now, most of the time it's a pain in our body, but a lot of the time it's an emotional pain. Increasingly, it's an emotional pain. And one of the tragedies of going to the GP is that really often GPs only have at their fingertips, the ability to write a script. And yet the point here is that exercise and physical activity can do far more for you than getting a script from the GP. What are the basics of it? So if we think about what physical activity does, if you just think about the process of movement, if you think about going for a walk, going for a swim, going for a run, going for a bike ride, going for a rollerblade, going for a roller skate, going out with your skateboard, whatever it is that you like to do, sailing. I was talking to somebody who does a lot of sailing recently. What that does, physical activity of any kind, it increases your blood flow. Yeah, so you get more blood pumping through your body. What that does is it replaces, you start to breathe more deeply, so it actually exercises your lungs. What that does is it takes in more oxygen, that distributes oxygen and other valuable nutrients right throughout the body. Not only that, whatever you've put into your digestive system, which is just being sort of worked through, it is also distributed more effectively throughout your body and throughout your brain. And it's also a really important process for the processing of waste, so the processing of anything that you put into your body, and also the removal of toxins, both through the process of digestion and through the process of pushing blood through organs like the liver, the kidneys, the spleen, that all do the cleaning processes for the body. And also sweating. Sweating can remove toxins from the body that very few other activities can. Sweating is a really important function for the body. So begin to ask yourself, how often do you really sweat? So these are all the organs that benefit: your skin, your muscles, your heart, your lungs, the stomach, the kidneys, the pancreas, the liver, your intestines, your bowels, your bladder. So exercise isn't just about building muscle. Exercise builds everything. Physical activity helps all parts of your body. These are some of the known benefits. This is mostly the medical scientific research. I'm just going to go through it quickly. I don't want to get stuck on it. I want to get on to the kinds of activity you want to do. So we know that it reduces cardiovascular diseases. It reduces diseases of the heart disease, reduces diseases of the blood, including diabetes, and improves, I'm just looking down the list to see if that's what he mentioned. It improves diseases of the lungs. It reduces the incidence of those. It reduces the risks of bladder, breast, colon, endometrial, esophageal, kidney, stomach, and lung cancers. It regulates hormones, including estrogen, So really great during menopause, and when women are sort of going from adolescence into adulthood, before and after pregnancies. Lowers the level of insulin in your body, reduces the incidence of diabetes, it reduces inflammation in the body, it improves your immune system functioning, it reduces obesity, it improves the gastrointestinal functioning, it improves bone health, and it improves sleep. A lot of people have been coming to talk to psychologists and counselors about issues to do with sleep, and one of the first things that you will be prescribed is physical exercise. You will sleep much better when you are exercising regularly. So what are the benefits on the mind? Yeah, so it improves the brain as well. One of the really interesting findings of recent years is that exercise literally can be observed physically through measurements to change the brain. It increases the volume of chemicals critical to brain growth by over 30%. They're actually able to measure the differences between people who exercise regularly and those that don't. And people who exercise regularly, their entire brain grows. And critically, there's a part of the brain called the corpus callosum, which is the part that joins the two sides of the brain together, and it has a size that they thought for many years was fixed. But they've found through regular physical activity, you can grow that by about 1% a year, which then improves your capacity for cognitive functioning, improves your memory, it enhances your problem solving ability, it increases feelings of self-esteem and self-efficacy, it improves spatial awareness, the ability to have a clear understanding of where your body is in space, and how to manipulate the idea of physical objects in your mind. If you're doing work like architecture, it increases your energy levels, it improves your emotional regulation. So if you're struggling with the polyvagal system that we talked about earlier, exercise really helps you to move into that window of tolerance. So those are the short-term benefits. These are the long-term benefits. It reduces symptoms of depression. It reduces symptoms of anxiety. It reduces the nervous tension you feel in your body. It increases your positive mood. It increases energy levels. It increases your feelings of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to do things. And it's quite easy to imagine that if you start walking, you go, oh, I didn't realize I could walk 5 kilometers. You think, oh, I might try and walk 10 kilometers. Oh, I can walk 10 kilometers. Oh, I might try and walk 10 kilometers up a mountain. And then you've climbed a mountain. And then you think to yourself, if I can climb a mountain, I wonder what else I can do. So that's self-efficacy. Self-esteem is how good you feel about yourself. And if you've ever climbed a mountain, or particularly if you've climbed a mountain recently, you will know how good you feel about yourself when you get to the top of the mountain. Swimming, I'm going on an ocean swim in a couple of weeks. And the feeling that you get after having swum a long distance in the ocean is just incredible. You feel like you can conquer and do anything. It improves cognitive functioning over the long term. It improves your short and long term memory. It improves your ability to learn. The brain size increases, particularly the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of the brain. You get demonstrable increases in what's called neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to change, create new neural pathways, and neurogenesis, which is actually the creation and the building of brain cells. We used to believe not that long ago that the brain couldn't grow after the age of 26 and 27. We now know that's not true, that you can continue to grow new brain cells right throughout the lifespan, and that physical activity is a really important part of that. Improves your overall brain health. You're much less likely to get issues and incidences of brain disease. And it also prevents Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So we don't think about these things when we're in early life or middle life. But I tell you what, when you're 70 years old, you're going to be thinking a lot about how you wish you'd done more in your life to prevent yourself from getting Alzheimer's disease and dementia, because you are going to be seeing all of the people around you suffering from exactly those conditions. Keep an eye on the time. So what kind of exercise and how much? What does the doctor order in terms and prescribe in terms of what's the right amount of exercise and what kind of exercise is best? And the answer really depends on what you're doing already. Yeah, if you're doing nothing, then clearly you need to start with something gentle. If you're already exercising quite vigorously, then maybe you can consider doing more. But you don't need to do a huge amount of exercise. The current science is that optimum cardiovascular exercise is around 30 to 60 minutes a day, so half an hour to an hour, 3 to 4 times a week. Brisk walking is enough. So if you go for a bit of a power walk, that's fine, 30 to 60 minutes a day, 3 to 4 times a week. But just going for a stroll doesn't cut it. Other similar exercises, again, at that sort of brisk walk level of intensity, might be running. So jogging is fine. You can jog because that's equivalent to a brisk walk, or even more active than a brisk walk. You can swim. You can ride a road bike. You can do mountain biking. You can do aerobics, dancing. So anything that gets the heart pumping and the sweat rolling down your brow. That's the kind of thing you want to do. If you're feeling like your heart's really pumping, then you're doing enough. If you feel the sweat running down your brow, then that's enough. They also recommend different kinds of exercise, like strength and resistance training, only a couple of times a week, because it has different positive benefits. In particular, that kind of training, which includes doing weights, yoga, Pilates, calisthenics, gymnastics, rock climbing, anything where you're very mindfully moving your body and activating your muscles in quite a mindful, conscious way, increases what they call interoception, or body awareness, which is the ability to be aware of what's going on inside your body. What's interesting about increasing your awareness of what goes on inside your body, that also increases your emotional awareness and your emotional intelligence, and also your self-control, your ability to not react or respond to your emotions, which brings you into that window of tolerance that we talked about earlier. If you're doing this kind of that kind of strength resistance training through Pilates, yoga, etc., then when something happens in your body and says to your brain, "Oh, quick, freak out," your brain can go, "No, it's cool. You know, I can feel what's going on there. I don't have to freak out. We'll just get on with what we're doing. Thanks very much." So other kinds of useful activity are the slow yoga and actually doing mindfulness. Even though mindfulness isn't usually considered a physical activity, most mindfulness is about bringing your attention to your physical body. And so it has that same effect of increasing your interoception ability, your body awareness, increases your ability to tolerate stress without shifting into the hyper or hypo-arousal zones, widening that window of tolerance in your day-to-day life. And just getting a better sense of how your physical sensations relate to your emotional state. There's also some good breathing exercises. Running out of time a little bit. They talk about 4-7-8 breathing. So 4-7-8 is you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, and then you breathe out for 8. And then the 7-11 is similar. You breathe in for 7, and you breathe out for 11. And you do that a number of times. And you can find YouTube videos where they talk you through this. Similarly, there's a method that's become popular called the Wim Hof method, which sort of gets you to a state where you're able to hold your breath on the out breath for quite long periods of time. And there's a lot of evidence behind these methods that show that they have a particular impact on the body. Wim Hof claims that his method completely alkalizes the body. And so the acidic states are removed from the body, and that has a great deal of physical benefits. Wim Hof also recommends, and I can recommend too, I do this as well, I always have a hot shower now, and at the end of my hot shower, I switch it to cold. And what happens, it's really interesting, because what happens is you feel that cold water, and you're probably all familiar with it. What do you want to do? You want to squeal, yeah, and you want to jump. I want to squeal too, and you want to jump out of the shower. But if you tell yourself to stay in the shower, it only takes about 5 to 10 seconds, and you're like, "Oh, this is all right. Yeah, I'll jump in a cold ocean, I'll jump in a cold pool, but this is fine." And what it's teaching your mind is not to react. Yeah. And what it's saying to your mind is you're saying, hey, mind, you don't have to react to everything that the body's telling you. Just because the body's saying freak out, get anxious, run away, hide, oh, you don't want to be here, this is uncomfortable, your brain can say, it's cool. I'm not at risk of harm. Nothing's hurting me here. We're going to be okay. Sit with it for a bit. Wim Hof says the intentional discomfort is the ultimate cure for mental ailments. Look, we're out of time, but in terms of, I'll just sort of cover these briefly. In terms of how to get into physical exercise, I know, because I was young once and I still want to do this, that we get out of exercise and then we lose physical fitness and we want to go back to where we left off. But that's what ruins us, because we try and go in, we go hard, I want to get fit really quickly. It hurts a lot. And that sort of sets in a cycle of not wanting to do it again. Yeah. So there's that cycle of overactivity, pain, injury, having to stop again before we can restart again, and then a cycle of demotivation. So what we're wanting to be doing, and thank you for your time, everyone, is we're wanting to be keeping ourselves within our own current limits. It's another window of tolerance, really. They call it pacing, and it's about going. You want to get into a point of discomfort, but just so it's uncomfortable. You want to feel a little bit of pain and discomfort, but you don't want to push it into where it's really hurting. I did this a few weeks ago. I hadn't been riding my bike for a while. I got back on my bike. I ride with the group. Some people that were much older than me rode off really hard. I rode off after them, and I was burning, and it felt really great at the time. But I couldn't walk for about 2 days afterwards. Yeah. And so then it's like, oh, I now got to do all sorts of things to take care of my body. It became uncomfortable. Everything hurt. I didn't need to go that hard. Yeah. Just do what's right for you. All right. Primary purpose of the brain to control the body. Movement of your body enhances the flexibility and growth of your brain. Physical activity has a profound effect on both your physical and mental health, better than any pill you could ever take. And the advice is to make a start with what you can manage.